Call this meeting to order. And before we get started, let me read this real quick. Tonight's board meeting is being live streamed for the convenience of the public at www.okaloosaschools.com. The public may participate in the public comment portions of the meeting by either personal attendance or by calling the school board meeting public participation phone line. A separate seating area has been set aside for the press and public who are in attendance in the meeting in accordance with social distancing guidelines as provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. If calling into the meeting, you should call 850-833-3100. The phone lines will be operational beginning at 6 p.m. on the night of the board meeting, and callers will be transferred into the board meeting during the public comment portion and/or public hearing portion of the meeting only, in the order in which calls are received. Tonight, for the sake of those that are in attendance, we are going to do all people who have come to the meeting in attendance. We're going to do them first, and then the phone calls will be after all of our guests that are in the audience tonight. If you are calling into the meeting to make public comment, please be patient as there may be a wait time while being transferred into the meeting. And according to the governor's emergency order on conducting public meetings, we do have one board member, the Honorable Diane Kelly, who is not in attendance in person, but she is in attendance via telephone. So with that, we'll move to approval of the agenda and changes to the agenda. And we do have one change, consent agenda added item 8.21, multi-year agreement with FSHS School Broadcast Program presented by Vince Wyndham, Program Director, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. With that being said, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Chairman.
Mr. Destin makes that motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries 5-0. We are now down to recognitions. Mr. Chambers?
All right. So tonight is an absolute honor, and Sheriff Ashley, if you'd come down just for a second. That's right. That's right. And if you don't mind, you just got to be patient for a second while I say a few things. All right? So first of all, I think each and every one of us know that Sheriff Ashley is going to be retiring. And you think about the work that Sheriff Ashley has done, not only for the Sheriff's Department, not only for the School Resource Officer Office, not only for the school district, but for Okaloosa County and the state of Florida. But then you think about the School Resource Officer Program, and over 20 years of excellence has been established here with our school resource officers and the work that they've done being a partner in our schools. And Sheriff Ashley is the driving force behind that partnership. And each and every one of us know that when we didn't have resource officers in every school, to the point where now we have resource officers in every school, a lot of that leadership was under Sheriff Ashley to ensure that our schools would be not only a safe place here, but be one of the safest school districts in the state of Florida. Now, Sheriff Ashley has been quoted of even saying that he'll make sure that we have officers in our schools, even if he has to remove some of them from the street, which we absolutely appreciate. We could not have a stronger partnership than we have. You think about the School Resource Officer Program, the best school resource officer program in the state of Florida and even the nation, and that's through award. We have several school resource officers who have been School Resource Officer of the state and consecutively, and once again, that could not happen without Sheriff Ashley. To say that we are grateful for the partnership that we've had over the years would be an understatement. Personally, just I think back to my time at Pryor with you, and of course your kids have gone through the school district, and you have just once again been a rock for all that we do, and we could not be more grateful. And I just want to read this, we have a proclamation for you, a resolution for you, and our school board members and myself, and our school district, from our administrators to our teachers to our staff. And this is a resolution of tribute for you. It says, whereas the Honorable Larry Ashley was first elected as the Sheriff of Okaloosa County, Florida on November 2nd, 2010, after rising through the ranks of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office from Road Patrol to Chief Deputy, and was subsequently re-elected for 2 additional terms of office. And whereas the safety and security of students and employees throughout the Okaloosa County School District is the top priority for the superintendent and the school board, who have been consistently supported in that effort by Sheriff Ashley, who has championed school safety throughout his career. Whereas Sheriff Ashley has committed himself and his office to the School Resource Officer Program throughout all public and charter schools in Okaloosa County, which program he expanded during his tenure to ensure the presence of a qualified and trained school resource officer in all elementary and secondary schools in the district. Whereas under Sheriff Larry Ashley's leadership and unwavering dedication to the safety of our children, the School Resource Officer Program in the Okaloosa County School District is one of the most successful SRO programs in the country, and has been recognized time and again as an award-winning model program at both the state and national levels. Whereas Governor Rick Scott appointed Sheriff Ashley because of his passion for protecting youth and school safety as a member of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission. His tireless resolve and expertise as a member of that commission led to legislation changing and the result of safer schools throughout the state of Florida. Whereas on every possible occasion, Sheriff Ashley has extended himself and his office to support and advocate for the safety and security of our public schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the superintendent and school board convey a heartfelt thanks and warmest commendations to a great friend of education and resolute supporter of the Okaloosa County School District, Sheriff Larry Ashley, adopted today.
Wow. Mr. Chair and members, Superintendent, no award is earned by an individual, and I literally have the best team in the state and the country that have supported us, your principals, your staff, this board, this body, Captain Payco and Lieutenant Venuti. They're just all so committed to this goal, and we all say it over and over and over again. If we can't protect our kids, then nothing else really matters. It's hard to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic unless we can keep our kids safe, and that's at all levels, at all different grade levels, and we couldn't do it without you, and we thank you for your support, and I certainly thank you for this recognition and honor, because it is an honor, and it's one I hope that lives long and true in Okaloosa County. And thank you again so much for allowing me to be part of it. Thank you.
We're going to take a picture of the school board members who come down.
My mask back on.
Captain Payco.
Wow, what an honor. Thank you so much. Oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Gary must be by me, so he can go back where you were. There you go, just like that.
Love you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheriff, appreciate it. It's been great, thank you.
It has been. It's been an honor. I missed one ball. You got it.
So Section 4, we have no visitors. Section 5, no administrative personnel appointments. And we are now at Section 6, public comment. 6.1, members of the public desiring to address the school board Form MIS 5241, public input and/or discussion of agenda items. So before we get started, I will just let you know that if you have attended tonight's meeting in person, we're going to do in person first, and then if you're on the telephone right now, online, you'll be followed up after we do all in-person public comment. For those of you that are going to be speaking tonight, I do want to remind you that we do have a protocol, and first is that you have a 4-minute time limit, and that any comments that you're making tonight, please direct them to me, the chair, and any comments that might be derogatory or probably shouldn't be said to members of the board, I will stop you at that point. We just ask that when you address the school board, we do it in a respectful manner. So with that being said, I'm going to go in order of the cards that I received. And Mr. Mitchell, did you have some more?
All the cards you got are in the room.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start, excuse me, real quick. So Dr. Gregory Seaton, did I pronounce that correctly? Doctor, if you would, please come up to the podium and please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Name is Dr. Gregory Seaton. Address is P.O. Box 728, Marietta, Florida 32569.
Right.
Really wanted to address the issue around the book White Fragility that is no longer being allowed to be taught. If the facts are as they stand on their face, I think the district is missing an opportunity to develop skills around college and career readiness. In my day job, what I do is work with regions, educational systems, secondary ed, and post-secondary ed to develop pathways to employment. As you know, what employers are looking for in terms of college and career readiness, critical thinking, ability to work in groups, and communication. What this book would allow is, one, allow for students to be presented with ideas that they could think about and discuss in a critical format. Two, the issue of race is not going anywhere anytime soon. A recent study by Glassdoor is an employment data company, found that 62% of American employees have either witnessed or experienced discrimination. Of that 62%, 42% have experienced or witnessed racial discrimination. So on the workplace, discrimination is an issue that's undeniable based on data. If we do not develop the capacity of our youth to have these types of discussion, where will that capacity be developed? Education is supposed to be about the exchange of ideas and about getting students ready for their future, college and career readiness. I, for one, am interested in hearing, one, why the book was not allowed to be taught. Is it an issue of procedure or content? Two, if there are other issues of precedence in terms of sort of books that parents did not want to be taught, were they discredited on an issue of procedure or content? Three, if an alternative assignment was provided as demonstrated by precedent in the past, what is the challenge with this book? We are missing an opportunity to at a critical moment in history where the rest of the nation is really talking about issues of race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Given historically the lawsuits that have come against Okaloosa County School District around issues of race, equity, and the achievement gap, we can lean into this and be leaders in this area. If it is an issue of capacity, we can find leaders, facilitators, trainers, developers to assist in issues of capacity. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Okay, so now we'll move to our next blue card, and Dr. David Simmons, if you would please approach the podium. And again, you'll have 4 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chair, members, Superintendent, I'm Dr. David Simmons. My address is 111 Fair Avenue, Niceville, Florida. And I too would just like to add my voice to what we just heard, of the importance of books like White Fragility being told. I'm a professor of humanities at Northwest Florida State College, and a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee that's there. 2 years ago, we had a book club, a college-wide book club using White Fragility. And we met several times over several weeks. We had students and faculty and administrators were there, and I wish you could have been there to see the lives that were changed as we talked about the problem of systemic racism, and the eyes that were opened, and the students that told me, thank you so much for doing this. Since I teach students that come from your district, I really want students who are prepared to talk about issues like race and class and gender and sexuality, and not only so that they can do well in their higher education, but also so that they can interact in the world in a more empathetic and loving and compassionate way. Not discussing systemic racism enables systemic racial injustice. The purpose of education is to teach ideas that will open the minds of students to higher, more compassionate ways of living and interacting with others. When challenging books are censored, we legitimize oppressive structures that then remain unquestioned. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir. All right. We'll move down to our next blue card, and a little bit smaller there. So, Misty Schneidwind. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's close enough.
Okay. Well, you'll have a chance to pronounce it for me. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Yes. My name is Misty Schneidwin. I reside at 105 Oakwood Circle in Niceville, Florida. I am a family practice provider. I have 2 children who graduated from Niceville, one in 2016 with high honors, and one is valedictorian in 2018. A teacher at Choctaw High School, as you probably know, has recently been trying to discuss topics from the book White Fragility. I sent all 5 school board members an email on Friday morning outlining my concerns related to this situation. I hope that one of you will take the time to reach back to me with answers to those questions. I'm not here tonight to discuss whether this book should or should not be approved. That will play out with time. I'm here tonight because I don't want the feedback that was received from the original parent to be the only voice that's heard. I learned of this matter after a concerned parent reached out to the Okaloosa Democrats. They reached out to me, and I reached out to the youth that are involved with the Niceville BLM movement. They're the ones that have raised money to put signs up around Niceville, billboards up around Niceville, as well as the first one up in Fort Walton today. They put together a petition that has so far received over 1,300 signatures. That's in less than a week's time. I would like to take the rest of my time to read you some of the comments that we've gathered on that petition. These comments come from current and former students and their parents, current and former educators and their administrators, current board members and pastors, and other concerned citizens who want to do nothing more than arm our youth with the tools and knowledge necessary to help make the world a better place for everyone. I'll read the name and location of each commenter. Leslie Fuller, Niceville, Florida. I think it's important to discuss topics of race, particularly in regards to the history of our country. Books like White Fragility help white people understand the issues that minorities face and what role the majority culture plays in racism, whether overt or implied. Our young people should be able to have honest conversations about this so that true unity and change can come to our country. Elizabeth Buchenkamp, Niceville, Florida. Healing this country includes talking about the things you want to hide. Racism is real in the United States, and we want to respond to that. Danielle Avalone, Mary Esther, Florida. I'm signing because I've had her class and because she challenges our morals and ethics. Her class is essential to the development of future generations. Nicole LeBoy, Crestview, Florida. It's a shame that our kids can't unlearn the ignorance their parents have installed in them. I, for one, encourage my children to read every book about racism and other social injustices going on in this country. It's time we stop racism, and the only way to do that is by educating our kids. Sam Parks, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Of course, children should be encouraged to consider ways that systemic racism continues to function socially, economically, culturally, and personally. This is not 1950. Our kids, and I have 2 of them in Florida schools, want to have these discussions. Plus, this book is fantastic. Eliza Johnson, Niceville, Florida. Schools should talk about racism. It's something that minorities have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. People need to be educated so that we do not keep making the same mistakes. Fiona Crawley, Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. It is a privilege to learn about racism instead of having to experience it. Emily Finley, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Racism keeps dragging our country down like an anchor. It's time to break that chain. Alexis Lawrence, Crestview, Florida. I go to Choctaw and agree this should be discussed. Erica Kuna, Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. How can one be the change to fight against such a topic if they aren't given the tools to educate themselves about it? Change starts now.
Mr. Chairman, there's 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you,
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Thank
Akers.
you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, and now we have Kimberly Davidson Woods. If you would, please come to the podium. And if, good evening. If you would, please state your name and address for the record. You have about 4 minutes.
My name is Kimberly Davidson Woods. I live at 821 Cardinal Street, number 10, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I think I may have a different, this is kind of hard for me. I am a product of Okaloosa County School District. I graduated from Fort Walton Beach High School in 1993. In 1992, we had an African American Studies class at Fort Walton Beach High School, but because the powers that be felt like it catered to the African American students and it coddled us, the class was disbanded. It was taught by Miss Gilly. In my time in Okaloosa County School System, I was required to read Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, written in 1852. That had very derogatory words in it, such as mammy and Piccadilly. We were required to read Adventures of Tom Sawyer, written in 1876 by Mark Twain, and it had the N-word in it several times. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, 1884, had the N-word over 219 times in it, and that was required reading for us. The N-word was there until 2011 when it was replaced. One of another classics, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. My daughters read it at Choctaw. My daughters read it at Niceville. It had the N-word 50 times. It seems that the N-word really doesn't bother anybody but the people that it's directed towards. This is part of that white fragility that we're talking about. You know, I don't think that a lot of people realize that Okaloosa County, Escambia County, and Santa Rosa County, we have the highest incarceration rates in the pipeline to prison for our school districts. And a lot of that has to do with race. A lot of that has to do with us talking directly, because when a black woman talks directly, we're always perceived to be angry. And that's not always the point. I think that race plays a lot in this community. Right now in Okaloosa County, we're not burning down buildings, we're not looting, we're not rioting. And I, for one, don't want that. That's not civilized. What's civilized is sitting down, using our critical thinking, allowing our students to think for themselves, giving them the opportunity to use the tools that Okaloosa County schools put in them. Taking books, burning books, we're going back into the 50s. We're going back into the 60s. My mother is from a small town called Lafayette, Alabama. In 1970, as a high school student, she integrated her school. In 1970, Lafayette, Alabama, in Chambers County, Alabama, still had whites only and still had blacks only water fountains. The civil rights movement, a little over 50 years ago. As some things have changed, a lot of things have stayed the same. If we want change, we've got to be a part of that change. We've got to allow our students to use the tools that we give them. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. Okay. Mr.
Chairman?
Mitchell?
Is there anybody else?
I was just asking, Mr. Mitchell, do we have any? Okay. And would you explain the rules to him for me?
Go ahead and put them through. This is the Okaloosa School Board public comment line. Please state your name and full address for the record. You'll have 4 minutes. You're now live with the school board.
Hello, my name is Sonia Vasquez. My address is 115 Baker Avenue, Northwest, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I just also as well wanted to speak on the book being Remove White Fragility. I have an organization here as well called Speak Justice. I'm actually CEO of Speak Justice. And what that group does, I have a platform where I have people to come on and speak about equality, racism, police reform, and equality. So I think at a time like this, I noticed through my reading that it took one parent to complain that they didn't want their child to actually be exposed to the teaching of racism. And I feel that's kind of absurd because, I mean, we have hundreds of other parents that are concerned and want their kids to be educated on racism. So I think out of all what we're going through in the world today and racism being top on the list, this book should not be removed. Because as everybody else has said, this is a time we need to come together and educate our youth in racism. They don't understand. It's a lot that we're still learning about racism. So this is not a time to pour our techniques and tools from the schools to try to educate our kids. And I'd say that, people are going to complain. I mean, that one parent that complained, I don't think it's fair to the other kids that would love to learn about racism. It's very important now that we teach our kids. And that's all I really have to say, about it, because all our kids that I can see, we get along. We don't have no big issues. Like the lady just said, we don't have no looting. We're not burning down buildings. We're getting along just fine. And this is just something that we can use to keep our kids educated because, hey, we can't deny that racism don't exist. We can't deny that discrimination don't exist. It's here, and it's getting worse. And we need to keep our kids, we need to be a step ahead and keep our kids educated. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you for taking time to call tonight.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No other callers in the queue.
Okay. Mr. Destin?
I was just going to ask Superintendent to give us an update on this issue and where we've arrived and what steps we've taken.
All right. So, first of all, I do want to say, as it pertains to racism, as it pertains to discrimination, I think each and every one of us up here knows that we do not believe in our school district that there is any place for this type of behavior. But what we also know is that when it comes to instruction, when it comes to what is taught in our schools, there are processes in place. And when it comes to novels that are taught in school, so for example at the high school level, at the beginning of the year, there are novels that are set aside for each school. And at the beginning of the year, at the high school level, many of our high schools will even designate that a senior class is going to teach this novel, an 11th grade class is going to teach this novel. But if you end up going in a different direction, or you want to choose a new book to be taught, then that book then goes through a process as well. And for example, at Choctawhatchee High School, there's a process by which a teacher would go through if they want to teach a novel that's outside of what was already established and agreed upon by an English department. Looking into this situation, there appears to be that a process was not gone through in terms of this book, White Fragility. Now, I think it's important, and I'm just going to say this because just going to be kind of blunt and matter of fact with this. When you're in a school district and whether it's a novel or whether it's what's being taught, you have to have some checks and balances in terms of how you do things. And I'm not even talking about the book White Fragility. I'm just talking about content or novels. So it's important that you do have a process at the school level. So just anything and everything isn't brought into a school district. And I'm not even talking about race, not even talking about the book White Fragility. But you have to have a process and you have to have checks and balances. And also, when you get ready to teach a novel, in every grade level, there are standards for an English course. And if you're going to teach a novel, the novel needs to be teaching the standards within that course. And that's what drives what is taught in courses like English. And in preparing for a novel, you want to make sure that you have a good instructional plan in place so you know specifically what's going to be taught. When you look at this book right here, and I'll just say this, the teacher is an absolutely fantastic teacher, an absolutely passionate teacher, a teacher who reaches kids in just amazing ways, and someone who I highly respect. When you go into a novel, or you go into a novel that's not on the school's already predetermined list, all I'm going to say is it is extremely important that you have an instructional plan in place already and you go through the school's process. And in this case, from what has been reported to me, that did not happen.
The process takes how long? In other words, the question I ask is, could the book go through the process and come out the other side if it meets the criteria, and what are the criteria? As a general rule, I agree with what these folks have said. Censorship is never good, except for in very, very extreme cases. And I wonder if this is one of those. In other words, can the teacher go back and go through the process in a timely fashion where a decision can be made that it's proper or it's not?
So to be as clear and direct as I can be, so in any case, a teacher could go back through a process with the school's administration, and after the school's administrator and that department chair say, hey, this is a book that looks like it has merit, there's an instructional plan, there's objectives to be taught, then a school could do that, absolutely. I think as a school district, we also have to look at what is being taught as well and make decisions accordingly.
And I would agree with that sentiment also. I've not read the book. I think I will. And I'm curious about how many novels we have rejected or approved over the last year or two. Anyway, I think this is an issue that should be looked into, just because we have a good number of the community who are concerned. And as I said, censorship goes down the wrong road almost always. So that's all I'll have to say on the issue until I read the book.
And I do want the board to know, and once again, when you look at this situation, once again, an absolutely amazing, dynamic teacher. Choctaw, an absolutely fantastic school. But also we do have an MIS form, I believe it's MIS form 1090, I believe off the top of the head, that also is to be filled out in these situations. So process, I think, does matter. We also have Ms. Heck here from Choctaw High School if you have any questions for her as well.
And one thing that's also true that might need to be stated is that when an alternate book like this is being taken, has been submitted for approval, sometimes there are students that book might not be one that's acceptable to them or to that parent, because you usually let the parent know that we are looking at studying a book that's not on that regular one. Then that student is given an alternative to that. And so in this case, that wasn't done either, because that protocol was not done. So there are a couple of things here. So it's not so much that book, just that we've not gone through the protocol. So it's not anything. It's not like a banning. It's just going through the steps that we need to do to make that acceptable.
And I guess I'll reiterate my question to Ms. Heck, who might have to be a little closer. How long does it take to go through the protocol and the process?
Yes, sir. So I don't think going through our process there's any defined time. I do want to lay out what the 3 steps to the process are. Maybe I could speak to that a little more clearly. Regardless of what department we're talking about, regardless of what content we're talking about, we start with a teacher bringing whatever it is that they want to add to the curriculum. In this case, we're talking about a novel. We start with what is the rationale for wanting to embed this into the curriculum. So understanding why it's important to read something. In some cases it's content, but we always look at how can we tie this into the curriculum and standards, because that's imperative. Another part of it is understanding what will the learning plan look like, the entire learning plan for this novel. So we're looking at, instructionally speaking, since it's the first time ever, how will we do this with our students? What will be the learning activities? What will the discussions be based around? What do we hope to accomplish with our students? So that's at the root of it, and that's what happens at the school level with teacher and administration. To answer your question about how long the process takes, it also depends on the teacher, because that's a lot to prepare, and it's a lot so that we can talk through it thoroughly. Some of the things that always come up when we're looking at a novel are, especially at the secondary level, are, is there any bit of profanity in this book, and to what extent? Is there any bit of the treatment of sex that could be viewed inappropriately? Let's talk about that. Violence, to what level or extent is that talked about? So are there any passages or themes that might be considered objectionable or controversial? And let's talk about those things. I would never want a teacher to go into teaching something for the first time and not have thought through how difficult some conversations could be, and making sure that facilitating those conversations are going to be done in the very best way. This isn't at all about my teacher. My teacher is fantastic and is long rooted at Choctaw. This is just about our process to make sure teacher has thought through it, administration is aware. That's the first part. The second part is, and I think you were starting to allude to this, Ms. Ivanchek, is we have an obligation to let our parents know about what their child is going to be, their student is going to be learning about, and what the nature of those discussions are going to be about. Again, sometimes they could be sensitive, sometimes they could be controversial, sometimes they could be things that parents have yet to talk to their own student about. Now, I realize we're talking about secondary right now, but this also happens at the elementary level. So making sure parents are aware of what their student is getting ready to get into within the class. And as you were talking, Ms. Ivanchek, we always want to consider that if a parent wants their child to opt out of that specific learning opportunity, what is a suitable replacement so that the learning can still happen? So we make sure that there is an alternate assignment that parents are aware of if they so want to choose that. So really, that's the full process. We always want to ensure everything is tied to our curriculum and our standards laid out by DOE. We want to make sure that a teacher has planned accordingly for the entire unit of whatever it is they're going to read or be discussing or learning about. And I will say, I couldn't agree more with some of the speakers tonight that schools are where we want our kids to face hard conversations and critically think about topics. We don't want kids to be told what to think. We want them to be prepared on how to think and how to make the best decisions for them and what they really do think. And the topic of racism, it absolutely needs to be discussed in our community and our nation. This is not something that we should shy away from. But I firmly stand before you that I believe in a process to review something so that we understand what we're getting into.
Okay, well, let me ask you another question, then I don't want to be disingenuous, but you have books that have been through the process that are being taught now, right?
Yes.
And so there is a template for getting through the process, I suppose.
Yes, sir.
Well, then perhaps the teacher and the book can start down that path. And it would be interesting to see if it goes through the process and what timeline it does. But as long as those things are in place, then there is a roadmap, I would think, for the teacher and the book to go forward.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dr. Kelly, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we'll move on.
So-
Go ahead, Dr. Kelly.
Well, I am just very appreciative of the fact that that process was explained. I know for many, many years we have had a process at the school level and the district level with carefully laid out, thoughtful forms that were involved, as well as a timeline by which all of this is to take place. And so I think that was very important that our listening audience understand that this is not something that's just been thought of recently, that we have a well thought out process in place. So thank you for explaining that.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Okay, so we'll move on down the agenda. We're at Section 7, Committee and Staff Reports. This was a workshop only. And now we are down to Section 8, Consent Agenda, Item 8.1, Approval of the Consent Agenda. I need a motion to approve, please.
I'll move
the
it.
approval, Chairman.
Okay, so I'll go with Mr. Destin
And
with
I'll
the
second
approval.
it.
Second, Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. So we'll move all the way down to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resource Recommendations. 9.1 and 9.2 are informational only. So now we're at 9.3, Forgiveness of Workdays for Employees due to Hurricane Sally, September 14th through the 18th, 2020. I need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.4 is cleared certification requirements and issuance of contracts for the 2020-2021 school year. I need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Ms. Ivanchek makes a motion. Do I have a
Second.
second? Second, Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.5, add a field report for the 2020-2021 school year. I need a motion to approve.
Move we approve.
Mr. Destin makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.6 is employment separations. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes a motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second it.
Ms. Evancheck makes a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.7, personnel recommendations. I need a motion to approve.
So moved, Chairman.
Mr. Destin makes a motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Second, Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.8, employee transfers. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes a motion. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Ms. Evancheck makes a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.9, employee suspension. I need a motion to approve.
So moved, Chairman.
Mr. Destin makes the motion. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Ms. Evancheck seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.10, employee termination. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Evancheck. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Second, Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.11, reinstatement, reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes a motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Second, Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 9.12, leave without pay. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Ms. Evancheck makes the motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Dr. White makes the second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. So section 10 is discussion agenda. We had nothing moved from the consent agenda. Section 11 is construction program owners representatives business. 11.1, Mr. Destin, you are up.
Thank you, Chairman. I provided the agenda from this morning's meeting, and we specifically checked on Baker and the classrooms, and Jacob Titans believes that they will be available for occupation by Friday, perhaps earlier. The kitchen, not quite so fast. We're having a very hard time acquiring some of the customized equipment that goes into it. We think that it will be after Thanksgiving, hopefully before the Christmas break. But perhaps, depending on the availability of some of these fabricated custom tables and serving counters and sinks, they could be put off a little longer, but they believe they can take the old ones, retrofit them in order to get it open in that time frame. So that's where we're headed with that. In the rest of the agenda, you guys, if you have any questions at all, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. As always, we appreciate your thoroughness being on this committee and keeping us up to date with everything that's going on. All right, so we do have an action item, 11.2, TPM Program Number 6, Task Order Number 2, Pre-GMP District-Wide School Security Upgrade Project, Phase 2. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Evancheck, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. We are now down to Section 12, Information Technology Seat Management Contract. 12.1, CACI Task Order Number 2-174, OTC Camera Repairs. I need a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Okay. Ms. Ivanchek, I'll get you there, and Dr. White, you'll second?
Yes.
Okay, so any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. 12.2, CACI, Task Order Number 2-169, Ballet Academy data drops. I need a motion to approve.
Move we approve, Chairman.
Mr. Destin makes the motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Second, Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion carries 5-0. And we're at attorney's business. Mr. Ankers, do you have anything on behalf of Mr. McInnes tonight?
There are several matters that Mr. McGinnis is studying at the direction of the superintendent of the board, but he will report on those more fully at the next meeting, so
All right.
there's no action items.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ankers. We appreciate you being here tonight also. All right, superintendent's business.
All right, thank you, and I do want to thank you, Mr. Ankers, for being here this evening. And I also just want to briefly share, then have Mr. Horton come up. So as you know, October 9th was the deadline for families who were wanting to make the decision of whether or not they wanted to come back to the brick and mortar school from My School Online, understanding that we can also have some students from the brick and mortar who might be wanting to go to My School Online. And like we discussed on Thursday in subsequent board meetings, we all know that with these transitions, there's also staff implications as well. And we do not have all the final numbers yet, as you can imagine, but we do have an update.
Thanks, Mr. Chambers, board members. So we're looking at in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000 students potentially coming back. So keeping in mind that's just a one-way flow of students. We've had about 7,300 out for My School Online, so thinking of that as a percentage, a fifth of those that are out, maybe a little bit more coming back. And that does not take into account that there still is a trickle of students who are going in the other direction. So it'll be a challenging task the next few weeks to get everything aligned. We're going to be talking with principals on Wednesday and firming up plans for if and where teacher movement's going to need to occur, if and where new sections will need to be either built to accommodate new students coming back into the building or dissolved if need be in the online section. So all that's got to be done with a lot of communication to parents to make sure they're aware. And obviously when they're making the choice to come back into the building, they understand there'll be some adjustments to their schedule, but we want to try and get that accomplished in the next week to 10 days. So we've got a kind of a settling in week there before we begin the second 9 weeks on November 3rd, which is a Tuesday. And we do have a teacher work day concluding the first 9 weeks just in front of that day, so it'll give all of our teachers an opportunity to kind of reset and make sure we have access to all the resources that students and teachers need.
All right, board members, any? Okay.
So that number works out to be about 60 to 70 at the high school level so far, and maybe 40 to 50 at the elementary school level, and we're seeing it generally spread out across grade levels. So we're hopeful that it's not a tremendous burden in any one area, that we can kind of monitor it and hope things can stay, we can stay fiscally responsible, and then also work with the students to make sure we get them supported properly.
And in one addition, Mr. Horton, I think the being fiscally responsible, I think, is just something that I want to just kind of reiterate just a little bit as well. Mr. Horton alluded to it. I'll probably ask him just to go just a tad bit deeper. And you think about as 1,500 to 2,000 students come back, depending also maybe at what grade level they come back, or depending what course they come back in, will make a difference. If they just happen to all nicely distribute across all of them, we probably wouldn't have to impact an online teacher as much. But as we go through this process, we'll be working with Ms. Appleberg and others, but just what might happen in a situation with particular online teachers in terms of them maybe having to come back to the building, and what would be the impact maybe on online students?
So ideally, and then we'll start at the elementary level. So by and large, when the students went to My School Online, we're able to pair them up with teachers who were working at and assigned to that student's school. So in a vast majority of cases, I'll use Edge Elementary as an example, they may have a couple of teachers who volunteered to teach online, and they had students from Edge Elementary moving to online, and then were supported by those teachers. So as you get increasing numbers of students moving back into the building, it puts pressure on the enrollment in the building unless you transition a teacher back inside the building, and needing to do that at the right grade levels. And so there are some principals out there that have already figured out their plan, and the general rule of thumb will be, if you can solve your own school's issues by the students coming back into your own building and bringing your own teachers back into your own building, then that's the best case scenario. And you don't replace what's out there in the online environment because the numbers have decreased. And so it could be that you had, for example, 2 teachers out teaching second grade for a particular school, and they each have 18 students in their classes online. Well, maybe 15 of those students have decided to come back into the building, so you could transition one of those teachers back to the building, and the remaining 3 students that are staying online could then shift to that other teacher's classroom. And so that works well when all those students are captured within the teaching staff at a school. But as we know, where we needed to, we would assign a third grader from Lewis to a teacher from Edge, or a second grader from Walker to a teacher from Antioch, where there was room, keeping in mind the numbers of teachers that teachers would have in students. So you've got some of those scenarios, so it's not quite as simple as just bringing your own teachers back into the building. So now if an Antioch teacher needs to come back in the building because those classes in Antioch are getting large, but yet she teaches some Walker kids as well in her online platform, then we'll have to make sure we do something with those online students from Walker. And it may be that they could now go back to a Walker teacher whose numbers in their online have gone down. So a lot of moving parts at the elementary level. Once you get to secondary, and each kid has 6 or 7 course requests, you have to start looking at it subject by subject. So I mentioned before, perhaps my son teaches online math and teaches in the building. And so if there are 15 or 20 students at Niceville that want to come back into the building and they're taking Algebra 1, then as those kids transition back to the building, there may be a need for another section of Algebra 1 in the building, but there may be a need for one less section out in the online version. So then my son would shift from having 60 kids online and 90 kids in the building to now have more in the building, less online. So the APIs that we have at the high school level, they went through it the first time, and it was a very big challenge. And so coming back into it, they're telling me they think they'll be able to manage it, and I'm going to stay out of their way. My wife's one of them. Stay out of their way, and just kind of offer some advice and support, but try to keep those requests for extra sections to a minimum. Is that what you need?
Yes, and before you go, so and this is critical. So right now, we know that in an ideal world for online students, if a teacher was removed, in an ideal world, we wouldn't necessarily have to shift some kids to a different teacher. But we have to be mindful. We'd love to be able to just hire a teacher, for example, so kids didn't necessarily get disrupted, and maybe there might be less kids with a particular teacher. But what we also know is Okaloosa, just like the state of Florida right now, is also down in student enrollment. And we've talked about this at a couple of our meetings. So we have to be extremely mindful about FTE coming forward. We have to be extremely mindful of our staffing, which we have done. We have to be extremely mindful also of next year's budget and what that budget might look like. So in an ideal world, we would just go ahead and make sure that there are no disruptions, and unfortunately, with where we are in this new normal, like people don't like to say that anymore, but unfortunately, where we are, we know that if kids are coming on from online to in the school building, there's going to have to be some staff to follow, and we have to continue to be very cognizant of FTE and be very cognizant of budgets to come.
Mr. Horton, before you do go, sorry about that. I just want to personally say thank you for all that you do, and I know I talk to you quite regularly on a lot of occasions. What people don't realize is you're also our spokesperson for the school board, and usually when we have issues, I know I'll forward them to Mr. Horton, but I do want to say personally thank you for all that you do, and I know with everything that's on your plate, folks, this man, what you see is what you get. He is very cool, calm, and collective, and we are very fortunate to have somebody like him on our team. So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chambers.
That is it.
Okay. So now we'll go down to section 15, board members' announcements and requests for information, and I'm going to start with Dr. Kelly, who's on the phone. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just reiterate a couple of things, but I'll start by saying, as several of us have acknowledged, this is National Principals Month, and I think in this most unusual year that it's certainly rightful to highlight them and to point out what a wonderful job our school-based administrators, both principals and assistant principals, do for us. And we know that particularly in this year, every year, but this year with both the pandemic and hurricanes swirling all around us, they have certainly pulled their load of their share of the load to keep things going smoothly. So congratulations to all of those school-based administrators one more time in the month of October. And secondly, I wanted to say that congratulations to all the secondary Hope Squad groups out there. I know that in these last 2 weeks, they have selected their student membership through elections at each school, and those Hope Squads are now up and functioning. And I know we've said a couple of times that, what a more appropriate time, that we know that every time there's a level of stress and pressure, that just adds to the burden that our young people have to face each day. And as we said, COVID is certainly one of those. So congratulations to those students who made the Hope Squad teams and to their advisors. And then I just wanted to add my congratulations to Sheriff Ashley, and certainly for the SRO program. And you've heard me say multiple times that in the 3 schools where I was privileged to serve, I just cannot imagine serving in this day and age without a valid and valuable SRO. So thank you for that. And that's all I have.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. And how's the grandbaby doing?
Oh, he is just more precious by the day.
Well, we had to get that in there for you. So.
I should have. Oh, thank you. I should have sent you a photo to put up on the screen.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Savanche.
Yes, sir. Well, I've got my Gator fan tonight. My Baker Gators are 5-0. So we're congratulating Coach Brunson and those guys. And also, Joe Brunson was named the WEAR Channel 3 Scholar Athlete for the Week. So not only is he an outstanding athlete, but he is a pretty good guy in the classroom as well. So we're congratulating him. On the Public Schools Foundation, the teacher mini grants applications are about to go out. It's a great program that the foundation does. They give teachers grants anywhere from $500 to $2,000 to let the teachers do things that they normally couldn't do in the classroom. They have some great ideas, and they just don't have the funding to do those, and we don't want them having to, dip into their own pockets. So those teachers can apply for these, and they do some fabulous things. Those teachers come up with some very creative things. So we're kicking off that campaign. We're also continuing to do virtual mentoring with our Take Stock in Children. We had to totally switch that, just like we did our online teaching, and that's going great. We're working very well with those students and continuing that program so we can continue to let those students have those scholarships. And so coming up on the 19th is when early voting starts. And I just need to make this statement. As I think people know, there's a very important issue on this ballot for our school district where we want to have this sales tax. And I was looking at some statistics, and I just want the public to educate themselves on this topic because I think it's important to know the facts. And I was looking at something, and I believe the superintendent brought it up first about how there are two districts out, only two districts out there, I believe I'm quoting you right, and out there that in the state of Florida would have over 10,000 students who do not have this sales tax. So I started doing some homework myself, and interestingly enough, the other district that has a sales tax referendum on a ballot this year is Duval County out of Jacksonville. Well, coincidentally, I started my teaching career in Duval County. And so I ended my teaching career in Okaloosa. So I started looking at Duval County about what they're doing, and it almost identically looks like the information that we have out about what's going on here. It asks the same questions that we've been asked and that our community group has been answering for several months now, that the people want to know, like what happened to the lottery money, what's happened with everything. It has lists of things that each school needs. So I'm just asking the public to do your homework too and look at these things and educate yourself about where we are on this particular item in this referendum. And please look at it from the eye of what it can do. This very small request, 1/2 cent, and what it can do for our students. Because if you vote no, what you're telling our students is that you're okay with them not having the facilities that they deserve and that you know that they deserve, but you're okay with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Vancheck. Dr. White?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Destin?
I don't have anything specific. I want to thank the superintendent for his analysis and explanation of the issues that we discussed earlier about the book. And Principal Heck also, these are issues that can become very fraught and divide communities. And as long as we have a process that's timely and transparent, then we'll do all right. So thank you.
All right. And I was also going to echo the same thing. I appreciate you presenting tonight for the folks that have come tonight. And, you know, with Ms. Heck sitting out there and it's Principals Month, why not put her on the spot again? Ms. Heck sitting out there. She's one of our fabulous principals. As y'all know, she's at Choctaw. But, you know, I've known Ms. Heck for about 4 years now, and you know, she is one of our all-stars out there. But you know, our school district is blessed to have leaders like her and 38 other leaders that every day go in, and their top priority is our students, your children, and our future. So Ms. Heck, thank you very much for being here tonight, and thank you for all that you do. All right, so we'll move down to section 16, and this is the second part of public comment. 16.1, members of the public desiring to address the school board, form MIS 5241, public input and or discussion of agenda items, and this is 2 minutes for those that are wanting to address the school board. "30 seconds, we're waiting." You can feel the anticipation. Okay. So before we go, Ms. Scallon, Dr. Hale, Patrick, Jordan, Ms. Lightbourne, and we've heard from Mr. Horton, so I'm sure we're good. This meeting is adjourned.